So we will call to order the second monthly meeting of the Hendersonville City Council, April 24th, 2024. You have the agenda before you. Anything you would like to have changed on the agenda? Or a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
We're off to a good start.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. We have our agenda.
That was great.
Consent agenda. Anything anyone would like to have moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda so it can be discussed? Or a motion to approve those items?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and the consent agenda is approved. Any reason to do this? Should I go ahead and do it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mayor, I
Okay.
think you're
All
appropriate.
right. Before we go into the presentations, I do have a resolution of respect and appreciation honoring Debbie O'Neill Roundtree. Whereas on this 24th day of April 2024, after serving the past 2 years, 4 months as a City of Hendersonville council member, Debbie O'Neill Roundtree departs, leaving behind her a legacy of public service. We, the governing body, employees, and residents of Hendersonville, wish to acknowledge publicly the contributions made by Debbie O'Neill Roundtree. And whereas Debbie O'Neill Roundtree served the City of Hendersonville as council member from December 2021 to April 2024, and whereas during her tenure on the City of Hendersonville City Council, she was instrumental in, as a council member, the liaison to the tree board for 4 years and advocated for additional green space and tree canopy, and further advocated for the Neighborhoods Program, tree canopy study, and tree ordinance development. Celebrating the City of Hendersonville's 175th anniversary and the 100th anniversary of the Hendersonville water system. Supporting the development of a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan, and offering a series of community connection workshops to build relationships with a diverse group of stakeholders. Unveiling of a 253-space parking deck and updated parking management structure to support the growing downtown and high demand for convenient and accessible parking. Investing in City of Hendersonville employees by supporting the implementation of a pay and classification study and renovation to City Hall and City Operations buildings. The construction and reimagination of the Laura E. Korn Mini Golf at Edwards Park, reactivating a long vacant park and parcel. Entered into a contract for the construction of the French Broad River Intake and Pump Station project. Supporting entering into a partnership agreement with Hands On Children's Museum. Beyond her service to City Council, Debbie Roundtree championed Back to School Fest in Sullivan Park to provide school supplies and resources to students, as well as business resource workshops and other events to support the community. Implementing a water sewer rate study, structure and utility extension policies to provide more equitable funding for future utility projects. Whereas during her tenure on the City Council, Debbie O'Neill Roundtree has remained a devoted proponent of park, greenway, and trail development in Hendersonville, supported quality of life enhancements for the lives of community members, as well as City of Hendersonville employees, and championed operating a top-notch water and sewer utility for approximately 80,000 customers across Hendersonville and Henderson County. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Hendersonville, on behalf of the employees of the City of Hendersonville and residents and customers served by the local government and utility systems, that the Mayor and City Council extend to Debbie O'Neill Roundtree their sincere appreciation for all of her loyal and dedicated service to the betterment of the City of Hendersonville for the past 2 years and 4 months. And we will get this to her. Okay. We have a variety of presentations this evening, starting with the Parks and Recreation Master Plan update. And there is Mark.
Good evening, council members. Mark Stierwalt, Superintendent of Properties, Buildings, and Cemetery. So essentially in the presentation to come, really what we're going to be looking at is an update overall, but really just a discussion of level of service. We have Brenna Lappy, who will be leading the presentation, and then we also will have Kurt Culberson, who should be joining by Zoom. They're the principals and project manager for the design workshop, who's leading the charge for us. And I will keep my part short because there's a lot to go over. I'll turn it over to Brenna.
All right. Thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in. So I wanted to just give a quick overview of what we're going to cover today, a quick snapshot of where we are in the process. We're going to talk about some level of service considerations, project types, and prioritization criteria. We're also going to talk about funding and implementation and next steps and discussion. We also have a little bit of a Mentimeter poll for you all today, and hopefully we'll have enough time to do that at the end. It's just for us to get a little bit of a pulse check on how you're feeling about some of the draft strategies and funding. And ultimately, what we're hoping to get to today is an understanding of what the level of service considerations and approaches, agreement on how we're aligning with the future land use map and plan, agreement on the logic for prioritizing projects. We don't expect for everybody to necessarily agree today, but just kind of understanding that logic. Understand the order of magnitude for funding to implement the draft plan as it is right now, and then understanding kind of the needs to maintain this plan. So we'll dive right in here. Where we are in the process, we're approaching home stretch. After this, we're hoping to dive into drafting the plan document, which will then be available for comment and review before finalizing for your acceptance. We are in April here. We just met with the advisory committee yesterday and had them weigh in on this same information. And so we've got some good insight from them as well, and looking forward to hearing your feedback today. Level of service considerations. So I know that we presented about level of service before, but it's probably been a while. When we talk about level of service, these are the metrics that establish the goals. How are you going to deliver on parks and recreation and green space and greenways for the city of Hendersonville? And I'm going to walk through kind of some of the considerations, but typically, that generally is what do we offer? What amount of park offerings are we offering for a portion of the population is a typical way that it's measured. One measurement of level of service is through the number of facilities and how many residents they serve. So what this chart is showing is our current recommendation based on what we've heard from the community, as well as looking at peer cities and national metrics around where Hendersonville may go in terms of offering amenities. And again, this may or may not be through the city, but how many amenities are expected for the amount of population that you have. So the first numbered column there is indicating the number of facilities based on this recommendation that you would need based on the anticipated growth by 2050. The recommended level of service column is what the number of residents per facility recommendation is. The relative to current LOS or level of service is just letting you know where does that sit related to what your current level of service is in Hendersonville. So you can see many of them are equal to what you currently have. So how many are you going to need to kind of maintain that same level of service that you already have? The plus sign is indicating where this is an increase in level of service from where you sit currently. And there's just a couple of minuses, and you can see there that's to kind of bring you in line with where your peer cities are. There's a couple of asterisks on the last column there under a few items that are not typical for a city your size to offer, and so we can't really compare apples to apples on that. Okay, another metric is number of acres. I know we presented this before, so I won't dive into too much detail, but essentially how many acres per 1,000 residents or how many residents per park. Those are the some other elements of level of service to consider. And there's also 10-minute walk shed or walkability. How many people are able to walk to a public park is another metric or level of service to consider. This one, just the previous map is just showing your current city limits, and then this one is showing with the ETJ. Another level of service consideration is access and number of miles of greenways or trails. So that's another component to consider as part of this. So what we want to talk to today is, in the past, we've been talking a lot about this 10-minute walk shed, and how are we going to fill the gaps there? And the 10-minute walk shed is a program, kind of a national standard. Many cities are kind of committing to increasing the number of residents that are within 10-minute walk of a park. So one consideration is that, the long-term vision is for everybody to be within a 10-minute walk of a neighborhood or community park. Another option or consideration is that, trying to get everybody within a 10-minute walk of a neighborhood park, a community park, or a greenway. And then what we wanted to talk through today was this kind of more tailored approach that's based on the community types and future growth and character areas that are being established around the future land use map. So the tailored approach considers where you already have existing development. So it recognizes that there might be different expectations for level of service depending on the type of community that you live in and the amenities that are offered to you. With the kind of overarching idea that if you're in a denser area, you likely have less personal outdoor space, and therefore you have more requirements for needing a park within 10-minute walk from you. So this kind of approach is focusing your improvements on your existing local parks and then providing new parks where it's going to fill those gaps of level of service in the character areas that align with the future land use map. And then it also takes a look at more a regional scale park in those areas that might have a lower density. So if you're going to focus public funds in those areas, it should really be a larger park that's going to serve a larger service area. It's also an area that you might take more of a joint ownership approach in those kind of developing areas that are not already built up. So I just wanted to quickly, this is, I know from the consultants for the comprehensive plan and the draft future land use map, just for reference. And so we're kind of aligning with these categories that they have on the left, the type of delivery and approach. And so we'll walk through this. I did kind of just want to remind us of sort of different types of parks. So community, when we say a community scale park, we're talking about a park that's over 10 acres, and it serves an area that is a 2-mile radius or a 5-minute drive. A neighborhood park is one that's typically 1 to 10 acres, and more like 5 to 10 acres, and the service area is typically a 10-minute walk. And then you have some pocket parks and urban plazas or other types of parks that you have, and then signature parks are those parks that have real special amenities. So you wouldn't anticipate that everybody's within a 10-minute walk of a signature park. So I'm not going to go through all of these different character areas because I know we're limited on time, but I just wanted to give you a preview and then I'll kind of flip through them. But for example, there's rural residential living areas, and I'll just go back really quickly to point out where they are on this map. So that's this teal area. They're primarily outside of your city limits and often outside of your ETJ as well. And so the anticipation there is that if you were to commit public funds to a park there, then it really should be joint public funds, and that the level of service, you wouldn't anticipate delivering a 10-minute walk to a park for everybody there. So this is where we're suggesting that everybody is still targeted within a 5-minute drive from a public park, and maybe a level of service of 15-minute walk to a greenway or a trail connector. I'm going to skip family neighborhood living and go to multi-generational living because I think these two illustrate the point the most. So this is where we would really kind of, focus where you're going to focus on serving a level of service of within a 10-minute walk. So this is where you would focus your efforts on filling the gaps with neighborhood parks and a greenway or a trail connector in these areas. And this is where you have a more mixed-use development, higher need for parks and open space. I'll just kind of flip through some of the other character areas. You can see here that we've just, for each of these character areas, have described kind of the park delivery method, the types of parks that you might consider in those character areas, and then the level of service. So we've done this for each of the kind of center types. As you move through these more commercial mixed-use areas, these are really areas that you might see more of an opportunity for public-private partnerships for delivery. And same with the institutional mixed-use employment and innovation areas would likely be a partnership opportunity for delivery and operation of those parks. So I'm going to talk through now how we're considering prioritizing parks. And this, some of what we talked about plays into that as well. So when we talk about different project types, there's park improvement projects. So those are the parks that you already have, projects that improve those existing parks and bring them to a higher level of condition. New neighborhood parks, so those smaller parks that serve the day-to-day needs of residents, new community scale parks, which are larger, and new signature parks, which have more specialty destination-like facilities. And then you might have some special use facilities that are standalone, green space being just areas that are protecting your natural resources, and then greenway corridors. So in terms of prioritizing new neighborhood and communities parks, these are kind of the criteria that we've overlaid to help to identify where those kind of target areas are. So starting with quality, is this project going to improve the existing of a poor condition park? Level of service is referring to the goal for the number of facilities. So is this project going to help fill the gap in the number of facilities that were identified in the recommended needs for the community? Access refers to filling the walkshed gap, starting first within the current city limits. Greenways, this project adds to or completes the greenway system, so acquiring park property that also helps you to complete a greenway. Equity is referring to equity investment zones based on the Social Vulnerability Index from the CDC, and we'll show a map of that. Nature is focusing on protecting and preserving or restoring natural features. Future development is what we just talked about. So the project anticipates future growth areas. And so priority projects would have the most overlap of these criteria. And one of the questions that we'll get to later is, do you agree with this criteria? Are we missing anything? What would you weigh higher than others? So we'll get to that. So I'm just going to quickly kind of flip through. This is just each of those criteria. So, we've have a condition rating for parks. So there's kind of 3 priority parks for improvement in the system right now. We talked about the level of service and the number of facilities. Talked about access and filling the walkshed gap. Greenways, equity, these are the dark pink areas, or red as they sort of look on the screen right now, have the highest social vulnerability rating. And this takes into account household demographics. it takes into account ethnic, racial, and poverty statistics. And this is through the CDC that provides this information. So the indication here is that if a project also is within this area, it would give it a higher ranking in terms of prioritization. Nature, this is an aggregate of tree cover and floodplain and your natural features throughout the city and ETJ. So these areas would be your higher priority in terms of protecting what you already have. And then again, the future development. So the areas that are anticipating higher development, getting ahead of anticipating those green space and park needs for that development that is going to be occurring. So this is an aggregate of kind of applying this logic. So I wanted to note that we kind of started with all the park gaps in terms of new park projects. And, we're kind of making the recommendation that you're not going to focus on new park projects within some of those place types. So those are not showing up as a blue circle on the map right now. So this is the big vision. It might be 2050. We can talk about the timeline. Maybe it's longer. But the idea is that this is the number of parks, if you were to commit to the level of service that we were talking about, that would be required. And so you've got 3 existing park improvement projects. You've got 27 new neighborhood park projects. I'll mention that 11 of those are within your current city limit boundary, and the remaining are outside of that within the ETJ. 2 community park projects, 1 signature park project, and 15 new facilities or amenities. Phase 1 priorities. So we took a look at all of that criteria and also trying to right size it a little bit, taking a look at the highest priority, focusing within the existing city limits primarily. And so this is what we are suggesting is kind of your phase 1 goal. And again, a discussion about how long phase 1 is. Right now we're saying phase 1 is 10 years. So this would be 3 existing improvement projects, 6 new neighborhood park projects that would accommodate 5 new facilities that you would invest in. And then we've identified the special or joint projects because we think that there's different buckets for funding for those. A new, downtown park or amphitheater project that has been throughout this process a priority from the community and from what we've heard from you all. And then a new senior recreation center, something that has been mentioned often as well. We did the same thing with the greenways. We'll just kind of mention that here. So different map here where we asked everybody to rank their priority for greenway projects. The focus here really is to kind of start with what you've already got planned. And so that's really your phase 1 is implementing what's already been planned and then moving on to those other extensions, but still keeping in mind that greater vision when you're thinking about acquiring parkland over time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can we back up 2 slides?
Yes.
One more.
One more.
The priorities, the 3 existing park improvement projects, can we describe, are those going to be described later, or can you identify what those 3 are?
Yeah, so those are 3 existing parks that were ranked as kind of a lower condition. So these right now, we're not giving you specific, put this amenity here kind of thing, but some assumptions around, around investment per acre to improve those parks. So those were the parks that were ranked the lowest in terms of condition right now.
Was there any evaluation around the pool at Patton, and any thoughts about the age of that infrastructure and the condition of those? Kind of surprised the assistant manager and I that that's not on that list. So
That's a good point. Yeah.
It was built in the 70s, maybe.
Yeah,
So-
that's good feedback. That is a part needs to be moved into phase 1, and that could be a part of the facilities rather than like the whole park as an improvement.
Yeah.
But that's good feedback.
I would encourage you to look at that, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to disrupt that.
No, not at all. This is just a map just showing kind of all of the projects if you're thinking about your big vision. So we're going to talk about funding and implementation, and this is really a part of the next step is, once we kind of get an understanding of agreement on vision and timeline, we start to put some action items together around funding and implementation. So what we wanted to these are high level numbers right now, but to give you just kind of an order of magnitude, if you were to look at the full plan on the left of the screen, that is describing kind of the ballpark amount for investing in these new capital projects. So you've got around a little less than 75 million in terms of the full plan. That doesn't include the kind of signature park or specialty center or greenways. We've separated that out. And then, no, it does not include land acquisition. Yeah. Phase 1 10-year plan, potentially 10 years, would be around just under 15 million for those top 3 categories of existing park improvements, new neighborhood and community parks, and new facilities. And then you've got potentially, another 10 million if you're going to target the downtown park as part of a phase 1, and then 10 million in new greenways. So I wanted to note that, if it's 25 years, that's around, for those top 3 categories, is around 4 million a year, to give you kind of an order of magnitude. Obviously, if you stretch that out further, that's less a year, but just wanted to give you a sense of scale, and how you pace it might not be 4 million a year, but giving you a sense of what that looks like. So one of the things that we just wanted to talk about here is that this is the kind of mix that is typical when you take a look at an average park agency and where they find funding for operating cost. And so this isn't necessarily, not all of these may be available to you, for example, dedicated levies, but typically only about 61% is funded from the general fund across most park systems. Another 22% is usually coming from earned or generated revenue from rentals or programs or events. Another 3% often comes from other dedicated taxes. Another 3% is just other. 2% typically comes from grants, and another 1% from sponsorships. So one of our recommendations, and I believe we've presented these action items previously and are in kind of the back of this packet, is to explore starting a nonprofit organization that can help to fund and direct funds towards parks and park improvements as a way to get sponsorships and dollars directed towards parks in the future. We've also put together a list that we'll continue to add to of potential funding opportunities, grants that we've pulled together across many different projects, and those that are relevant from federal funding, state funding, and certainly we'll be adding to this list to help jumpstart the search for grant opportunities as you're thinking about projects. And so the idea here is another recommendation would be to, get somebody who either existing staff or potentially new staff that can really focus on going after grants so that you can be ahead of it.
Like a parks manager?
Could be a parks
Okay,
manager.
just wondered.
Yeah. Some cities do have a grant officer or grant writer.
I had to make that comment. I'm bitter. It's fine.
So I might have flown through that too quickly because I was worried about time, but happy to go back to any slides if you have any questions before we kind of jump into some polling.
On a slide, you had some demographics regarding parks and the number of parks there should be versus city sizes and that kind of thing. And then there was kind of a little disclaimer, fine print down on the bottom where it said it didn't include any county parks. Since we are so intertwined with Henderson County, I'm interested as to what our current level of service is right now, including the county parks that we already have around us.
Yeah. So the number of facilities or amenities, we did account for we removed facilities that were provided by the county. So the number I probably am not saying that right. The number that we're recommending includes the assumption that people's needs are being met as well from the county. For the acreage, that high level number, we just took what's within the area because you would kind of need to take a look at the whole county population. But that's a good question. We did make a note, if you were to include the county park, you do have the acreage and you do have the number of parks, just not the facilities or amenities. Does that make sense?
Kind
had a
of.
slide that showed that last night, didn't you? That showed the county together in the city. Didn't you have that?
Maybe. Let's see.
We had.
You?
Oh, somebody's microphone.
Oh,
I'm going to be in trouble.
is this the one that you're referring to, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So this one is so this looks at Hendersonville. And then below we do call out. So if you were to add in the county-owned properties, then you do have 25 acres per 1,000 residents. But that's not accounting for the county population that's also using those facilities, if that makes sense.
Some of those acreages are also places like Etowah and then also Eddyville.
Right.
Because
Do we have any idea what that number would be if you actually broke it down by the residents total of Henderson County? And then those numbers, like, I mean, I know we're not doing a Henderson County Parks and Greenway
Yeah.
master plan here, but
Yeah, we actually did not. So, oops, I'm not sure if I just did that or. That number actually only includes the county properties that are within kind of the service area of the city of Hendersonville, not all of the county properties. So I don't have that number handy,
Okay.
but
so that number would likely be much higher as far as acreage. If you
if you were to
actually
include
average.
all of the county, yeah, but then we would need to cross-reference it with the population of the county. Yeah, that's a good point.
I just wanted to know the ones that were close. We as a group last night were wanting to know the ones that were in the ETJ, just outside the ETJ. Was Jackson Park included, which it was. And, so you could get a bigger picture of it when you consider we're only 14% of the whole
County seat.
county as the county seat. Yeah.
And that was presented at the steering committee, right? The master plan steering committee. For the public to know where was it presented last night? It was presented at the steering committee meeting for this project. So that's where that was presented. Jeff or Reno, or any other questions that the steering committee had that maybe the rest of city council should know about, or thoughts? Because I know I had limited time, so I pushed you through it. But anyway, so.
Well, we actually, I shifted a little bit of how we went through it today based on some of their feedback. So hopefully address some of those questions, but I think, mostly was just around clarifying some of the charts, the level of service chart. There were some questions about that. But I think we covered most of what they had questions about. And then we did do some polling with them as well to get a sense of how they were feeling about the prioritization criteria, how they were feeling about the level of service. And for each of those, There was a lot of support for kind of the approach to level of service, that tailored approach. There was a lot of support for the prioritization criteria. And so I would love to, if we
I
do
may
have time.
put one in here too. I was more interested in where we were weak in the city as it is now and the ETJ, and less concerned immediately about where the expanded growth would be, because there's no way we can know where there's going to be any expanded growth right now. I explained that, we're in discussions with the county to figure out how we can come to an agreement on that. So I really wanted to focus on the, I guess, where we were the weakest inside our city limits, so we could look at that.
I'm interested to understand the discussion around option 2 versus option 3 and why this tailored approach was favored.
Yeah, I don't think we heard specific feedback about why versus one or the other, more just support for 3. However, we did, I think one of the main advantages to it versus just a across-the-board applied approach is that you're kind of making sure that people are getting neighborhood parks close to where they live and where they need them.
But option 2 is within 10 minutes that they have any access to anything, right?
A park or a greenway. Yeah,
So some sort of recreation, passive, whatever, active.
Right.
Was within 10 minutes.
right. Yeah.
Okay. I guess
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think what we found in other circumstances is that the lift to get a full park within a 10-minute walk of every area in the city is often quite difficult. But if your intent is to have an extensive greenway system, as you're working toward in Hendersonville, right, you can give somebody access into the park system, if you will, because they could be a 10-minute walk or greenway. And that's one way of maybe rationalizing or getting to a park system that's more achievable, right? So that's a choice to be made. You want to create neighborhood parks within a 10-minute walk, the entire city, or does access to greenway that then gets you to neighborhood parks facilities through the church?
in the 2050 plan and the 10-year kind of scenarios, there was like a $2 million like reinvestment into current parks portion. Does that account for any of the current like programming that's already in place to improve the parks that we actually currently are working on?
That is just based on a per acre assumption around reinvestment for the parks that are in poor condition.
Okay, so there could be 500,000 already in place.
There could
that's
be.
not actually included in that number.
It would be, I would think that would be included in that number if it's going to those parks. Yeah.
So the 2 million is just an assumption based on averages.
Yes.
It may not actually be an actual evaluation of what the needs may be in our existing parks.
That would be the next step, where we kind of apply some assumptions first, so that you can get an order of magnitude. But then, if you've already got certain parks and projects and money committed, we kind of break down, what your 1-year plan and your specific action items, which is the next step, would help to break that down further. Yep.
Patton Park.
Well, so I was going to ask about that. On the map, it didn't look like Patton Park was one of the current parks being improved. Like with the colors, there was like a red, and then Patton Park didn't have a red, but that one's actually currently
Yeah.
undergoing some improvements. So what does that mean if the map didn't actually have that on there?
We were kind of showing how the prioritization criteria shows investment in the 3 parks that have been indicated as the lowest quality currently. So that's what this kind of high level breakdown is showing right now. But I think that's a good point and something for us to carry into the next draft, is to make sure what we would need to kind of separate out is what funding's already been established versus what is new funding that needs to happen.
I think something key to keep in mind is there's not been a lot of funding allocated for parks. And I think what would help the city council the most is to establishing those priorities for existing and identifying where that money needs to be spent on existing, and also big picture, but our budget is, I think Councilmember Hensley would, as she mentions park manager and shoots her eyes at me, I think she would agree that there's been, and other council members too, would say that we haven't been allocating enough funding for parks. That's open for prioritization and discussion, but I think it would be key that if we, on the next phase, not only assumptions, but really kind of evaluate where we need to, where the council may need to what level they need to get to have a good park system, and that will help them with prioritization and decision making. Is that fair enough?
Do we get to take the quiz?
Yes, that would be great. There should be a QR code if you are able to join. There's no right answer. And you can join in through the QR code. And I believe they're going to be sharing that here. Yeah. So it will show up on the screen here. Let me see if I can. Start here.
Do it.
What? I did it last night. With Mark's help.
Oh, look,
My phone died.
look at my little thumbs up, guys.
Oh, no.
Ooh, I'm green.
You there? I can see a couple people joined.
Sorry.
Okay. Here. Is everybody in? Okay, no worries. Okay, the code is still going to show up at the top of the screen here, so you can still get to it if you need to. Is everybody seeing this first sliding question? So for the first question, is just asking you to indicate your level of agreement with the following statements. And so on the left is strongly disagree, on the right is strongly agree. So you can slide it across. So the first one being whether or not you agree with a tailored approach to providing level of service for parks and green spaces. If you agree with the alignment with the future land use map, and then the logic and criteria for prioritizing projects. Cool. Looks like there's 3 people who've plugged in. Okay, all right. We'll keep going. No worries. Okay. And you can type this in or we can just talk about it. But curious if there is anything, I know there was at least one response there that was a little bit lower on the agreement for the approach to level of service. So is there something that you would change about that tailored approach, or do you prefer one of the other options for thinking about level of service, and whether you're within a 10-minute walk of a park, a greenway, or the more tailored approach that focuses on character areas? Okay. Yeah. All right. Can I ask for a little bit, like, kind of the reasoning behind that?
City or municipality or governor's job is to help provide recreation of some sort close to someone's home. And I think that level service of number 2 accomplishes that.
I gotcha. Okay. All right. Okay. This one is a little bit different from last night. We added this one. So we would like to know how you would rank the prioritization criteria. So it seemed like there's pretty good agreement on the logic behind prioritizing projects. But these are kind of the criteria that we talked about: quality, focusing on existing parks in poor condition, level of service, focusing on filling the gap in terms of facilities needed, access, filling the watershed gap, greenways, equity, nature, and future development. So if you do have a thought on how, if you think some of those should be given more weight than others, this is what this question is hoping to get to. So you can drag around the priorities here.
Is this a pick 1, pick 2, pick 3?
This is a put them in order. Yeah. Give you a few seconds. And if you'd rather just share your thoughts about this, that's also okay.
I mean, I feel like the quality and access of our parks is kind of like the most important part for me at this point. Having good quality parks, even if you had 3 great quality parks as opposed to 10 not so good ones, I think having 3 really good quality parks with good access is more important to me. Especially with like limited funding and historically not great, ability to fund parks. Those would be priority for me.
Okay. All right. The next couple of questions around funding and implementation. So the first question is about the longer term vision. And here we kind of want to get a sense from you all if you think the long-term vision is too ambitious or not ambitious enough or somewhere in between. And maybe for discussion, is the 2050 kind of horizon timeline, are you comfortable with that? Or would you like to see something you think that it needs to be extended out?
I feel like this question is difficult
Yeah,
because like 2050 sounds like it's a long time from now,
right.
but it's not
Yeah.
a long time from now.
I don't know. I think it's
And
kind
that-
of a long time.
I know, but I mean, like, look how long it's taken for the splash pad, and that's just a fraction of what all of these other projects are going to be. So, like, I would like to have them happen tomorrow, but we all know that's not going to happen. So that's why this question's hard to answer. So I'm going to pick 3.
Any other?
Our question, is it a reality that what's out there?
Yeah. So part of setting the vision, looking out that far, is so you can start to think about the pieces and things that you need to put in place to get there.
I mean, I wouldn't want it to extend any further because then I feel like it kind of doesn't light the fire under us to try to make it happen. And like this year might be kind of difficult, but the coming years won't be difficult. And so that's why it's a hard question to answer.
We'll note that last night during the one of the comments that came up is with the advisory committee is they felt like it was important to decide what you want and then how to get there. And while you do have to pay for it, they kind of had the consensus to basically define what you want. And then if you have to stretch the timeline to get there, at least you're still working towards what you want.
Thank you. All right, same question, but for phase one, which is that smaller group of projects. Again, does this feel too ambitious, not ambitious enough? And any thoughts that you have too, if it's difficult decisions?
I think I meant to be,
You went to the other direction?
no, I'm right. Not,
Okay,
Not ambitious enough?
Oh, no. I messed up.
that's okay. You meant for it to be more on the side of too
I think it's
ambitious?
just fine. Where would that be?
It's a 3.
A 3 or a
Okay.
2?
I don't want that far off.
Okay. So it sounds like right now, Vicks are kind of somewhere in between. Maybe some different thoughts on that.
And you're at a big disadvantage here in presenting because we all are looking at a budget that's tight as it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody's having to roll numbers and put priorities. And that's why in the discussion last night, that's why the priorities are just very difficult right now because of funding and the budget. And the last night we spent a lot of time talking about, well, not a lot, but some quality time talking about options for raising money. What are you doing? And there was
Everybody doing this.
I know. I'm gonna say I hate these microphones, but anyway, it's we talked about creating a foundation, which I think would be really good, naming opportunities for different things. So, you know, I think if you start looking at trying to take, I think you said the average number is 61% comes out of general funds. That would be very difficult for us because if you use the 4 million that you hit, that's still $2.4 million out of the general fund. So we pick some things that are more realistic and easier to get to, and we try to prioritize those as doing that. That would be improving the existing parks, that type of thing. But also, you know, if we can get through this kind of a stalemate between the Board of Commissioners and City Council and get back to where we can do things like the Cancer Center, you know, the Acoustic Trail, we can look at these more realistically as a team effort, because to me, a park, just because it's built in the city doesn't mean anybody that lives outside the city can't come in and vice versa. Everybody in the city is a member of the, you know, a county resident. So I think there's a real opportunity here for us to kind of merge what in there, when they were putting out needing what people prioritized, it was green space, and we could work with that. And I think it's coming. I think we're going to get back to where we need to be, and then we incorporate some collaborations there that could work well. But there's a lot of different things that we can come together with. You look at, somebody brought up the Flat Rock Park, and that was so much private money. You know, they had an incredible fundraiser going out there and getting it done, and we could look at some things like that too. You know, I don't think we're ever going to see 4 million, 3 million a year, 2 million a year coming out of the general budget, general fund, just for one thing, as much as we'd all love to see it.
Any other questions or thoughts? I know we're just coming up on the hour.
I will add that I think that Jeff is being very realistic about that. But also if you have proper park planning, right? It's not going to hit you like that. You're, building up over a series of years and you prioritize a certain park or whatever. And then if there's a grant opportunity for us, Part If or something like that, then it makes it not such a big hit. But I think that's the importance of having that planning in place. And so I'm really glad that we're doing this. That's all.
Anything else?
Anything else? A lot of information in there that
Yeah.
needs to be digested.
Yeah, there's more too. So thank you. Well, thanks everyone, and looking forward to.
Can we get the slide deck? Do we have the slide deck? Can we get the slide deck?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right.
that'd be
Thank
great.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Right. Next, a public safety update.
Okay. Mayor Volt, members of City Council, I'll ask that Chief Mahan and Jay Heatherly join us at the podium. We've got several items that we want to kind of talk through tonight. I think the chief has a slide deck that's available also online. We have Katie Allen from Western Carolina University, who is, I'll let her introduce her title, as well as Tori Dole, who will be our intern from the social work program. So they will be available there. So the chief's going to cover several public safety items, and we'll jump in with a few other items after the chief's done. So.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Council, Blair Myhan, Police Chief. I'm going to talk about four things. One of them I won't really talk about, Katie will talk about, but we're going to talk about downtown, our new social worker program, police social worker program. We'll talk about homelessness in the city, and then, of course, CIT. Well, I say, of course, it's of course to me because I wrote it, but for y'all, so those are the four topics we'll talk about. But one of the things that we're looking to do this year is we have a downtown officer position. When I came here, it was filled by a lieutenant. It had been previously filled by an officer. I was in a position to, when that lieutenant retired, we put a sergeant in that position. It is not ideal because that sergeant has supervisory duties. He's in charge of the SROs and other functions. So it was limiting his time to be down there. So as we're going through the budget process, we discussed the idea of creating a new position that is a dedicated officer for downtown. So I mentioned to y'all last time at council that one of the vacancies that we now have was Sergeant Garden, who was assigned to downtown. So right now, I currently do not have anyone assigned permanently to downtown. So the patrol officers are covering that as needed. But the reason why we feel this is important is because of the growing complexities and the needs of downtown. There's 240 businesses in historic downtown. I think about 130 of those are I think what Jamie called hospitality type, restaurants, retail shops, things like that. So there's a lot of businesses. We have a increasing number of special events that are downtown that really needs a dedicated presence. And of course, on nice days, on a Friday afternoon, you will go downtown at dinner time and there might be, 500 or 1,000 people just for no particular reason other than enjoying downtown. So there's a lot. We were trying to get some coverage down there. And I think what this position will allow us to do is when we replace Sergeant Garden, that sergeant will be able to dedicate still part of their time downtown, assisting that officer. And we created the Boys and Girls Club police grant position last year, which to remind you was 50% of that officer's time would be spent at the Boys and Girls Club. The other 50% of the time would be spent on community policing efforts. A lot of those would be, involved downtown. So I think we would, we'll go from sort of a 65% presence downtown right now to about 200% presence, so almost 2 full-time people downtown with those three positions, creating that position this year. So that's, hopeful that we'll be able to fund that in the budget. But I know a lot of the downtown businesses really like having an officer dedicated down there to address some of the issues. And so we're hopeful to be able to replace that position with an officer this year and have them dedicated to downtown. Any questions about that before I move on? All right,
We do have funding in the proposed budget for that position, so is at this point, if the budget's adopted as maybe presented, there will be an officer in there. Then it's just a matter of hiring somebody and getting the right folks in and getting back to full staff.
Chief, does that include walking down into where the 7th Avenue?
Yes,
where
sir.
it's
Yeah,
being
that would
improved? We call that all part of downtown now,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yeah, to be clear, we're talking Main Street, historic 7th Avenue, that whole historic downtown area, and probably the surrounding Church King and some these,
Right.
Just the general area of,
Everything in between.
right.
I just wanted to make sure I understood it.
Sorry, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
So I guess due to the complexity issues that we have downtown, does a portion of the Main Street District's taxes cover any additional police presence? And I know that there are other areas of the city where we have rising crime levels as far as homelessness and break-ins, that kind of thing. And does it make sense to address those from a specific service district tax rate? Or is this just across the board? We're saying we need to fund this out of general tax rate as opposed to a specific Walmart area, right? So how is that addressed? Like, how do we divvy that up?
Yeah,
Councilmember Henderson, I think the way we're approaching this is, well, in fact, because this officer will ultimately be available around the whole city, but if they're dedicated downtown, and that's going to free up our patrol staff who is currently in the downtown to be out in other areas. So we're not proposing to fund it out of the Main Street budget.
Okay.
That budget is pretty tight as it relates to. So go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, and technically by law, we can't fund that type of service with the MSD tax.
What can you fund?
Services that are above and beyond for beautification, landscaping, things like that. So there's a set list that you can use MSD tax dollars for, approved by law. And Angie, please correct me if I'm wrong.
So good point. But the idea is that by having somebody dedicated in the core area of the city, where the people that our patrol staff will have more time to be out across 26th, they're less likely. We're actually spreading out the work, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
We had that very much in mind when we kind of put this proposal together, is that it would free up, just as the traffic squad has freed up some of our patrol staff to be out in other areas doing traditional patrol activities.
And Chief, if you will, just state again what we are having, how often it's patrolled now to where it will be patrolled, the percentage increase of actual beat time.
well, right now, we have patrol officers spending more time. They're doing foot beats, particularly in the mornings. They're responding to calls for service down there. What percentage of time that is probably a very small percentage of time where there's a police presence downtown, because again, they're addressing other issues around there. But I think that this single position gives us about a 2 full-time officer presence downtown, between that full-time officer and part-time of the sergeant, part-time of the Boys and Girls Club grant officer. And again, I've noticed, particularly in the warmer months, again, a Friday and Saturday night, there are hundreds of people just eating out at restaurants. And with the confined area that downtown is, the large number of people, I feel that it's important that we have a dedicated presence down there. And it's really almost impossible for me to take a patrol officer and assign them to Main Street from, 6th Avenue down to 3rd Avenue for, 3 hours on a Friday night. So this position this position will allow us to have more time downtown to be able to just address large crowds and, and just, we
I
want to
guess my
just keep
point is
everybody
it's
safe.
significant. It's a significant improvement.
Even with Sergeant Garden there, again, I think 50% of his time maybe could have been dedicated down there because he would have training, take time off. This will give us, if that was 50%, we'll be 4 times that based on creating this one position.
I like that number. Thank you.
Councilmember Hensley, I just spend the money. I don't know where it comes from, so I wasn't able to answer that question for sure. All right, so barring any other questions, I'll transition to the next slide, which is what we want to take the opportunity is to introduce you to our police social worker program. So this is an issue that John and I have talked about for quite some time now. It really came to a head in late last year, the growing need for us to have another tool in our toolbox to address some of our issues that are just, we're finding we're just not well equipped to do that. So if y'all can, I'm sorry. I'm used to telling people what to do, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to ask Katie Allen. She's online here to tell you briefly about the program, and then I also want to take the opportunity to introduce our intern. John and I interviewed a couple interns from Western Carolina, and we were very excited to have Tori Doyle start with us this fall as our intern. She will build the program. Katie will kind of tell you a little bit how that works, and then we'll let Tori introduce herself to you. And so can we ask Katie if she's available?
Yeah, are y'all able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. And I don't think I have the capacity to advance the slides, so
I got it.
Someone awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so my name is Katie Allen. I am a social worker. I'm social work faculty in the Department of Social Work at Western Carolina University. And I'm here today representing a partnership with Dr. Cindy Caravellis as well. She is faculty in the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And we founded the community care program started working together about 4 years ago, and officially started calling the program community care about 3 years ago at this point. If y'all don't mind to advance the slide. So Dr. Caravellis and I started working together in 2020. As I'm sure y'all remember, there was a lot going on that year. In addition to COVID and Black Lives Matter movements and the opioid crisis, there were a lot of national conversations around alternatives to traditional policing, calls for more support for behavioral and mental health and substance use disorders. And we started working together, researching programs that existed around the country, really asking ourselves, what's out there, what's happening, and if these programs work, why are we not doing this here in Western North Carolina? And what we found was that there was a pretty clear answer to that question. All of the models that have been developed for alternative responder programs across the US so far have really been developed in larger cities. There are some great programs out there, but none of them seemed realistic for a town like Silva. So we developed a partnership between our 2 departments at the university and also the Silva Police Department. The picture there is of Chief Chris Hatton, Chief of Police out in Silva, and his first social work intern, a BSW student named Chris Martinez. And we started working together to try to figure out how we could make a program like this work in a small rural town or a small town in a rural region. The program has 5 objectives. First is to expand the law enforcement toolbox by increasing officer response options beyond arrest, citations, and warnings. So not necessarily trying to replace those tools, but trying to offer an alternative when those tools are not the right options for fixing the problem that is in front of the officer at that moment. We want to help promote long-term solutions for community members in need through connections with appropriate resources, promoting safety of officers and community members through increased opportunities for de-escalation and proactive pre-crisis intervention. So not just intervening when there is a crisis, but really providing long-term ongoing support to folks who are at high risk of being in crisis. Reducing the risk of trauma from negative interactions between law enforcement and community members, And then also reducing officer workload and streamlining the officer workflow. So again, providing that additional tool for when officers run into a situation in the community that really would be more appropriately handled by a social worker, they have someone that they can call. They can go back to then doing the more traditional policing tasks. This slide here outlines the role of the coordinator and some specific things that that person does. The flow chart on the right, I'm not sure how big y'all are seeing this slide at the moment, so I'm not sure if it's possible to read through that text. I can obviously send these slides out if that would be useful as well. But essentially, the community care coordinator does a number of things. One of the main roles of the coordinator is to provide follow-up support for individuals who were referred by officers. So if a community member comes to the attention of an officer and the officer says, you know, there's really some social issues going on here. This is really related to poverty. This is really related to substance use or mental health concerns rather than what we traditionally see as criminal behavior. They can make a referral to the social worker. The social worker can then provide follow-up support and case management ongoing with that person really as often and for as long of a period as the community member needs. Most common referral reasons that we've encountered in Silva include homelessness, substance use, intimate partner violence, transportation needs, and medical needs. The community care coordinator can also provide on-site support and de-escalation if there's an immediate crisis happening and the officer believes that a social worker would be of use in that moment. The community care coordinator can come out to the scene, of course, after that scene has been secured by officers. And assuming that the scene is safe for that social worker to come out, but they can do some on the spot resourcing and de-escalation support as well. Another major role of this coordinator is to communicate and collaborate with existing community agencies. So really getting people connected to services when they need that. I know that in Henderson County, y'all have really amazing supports in terms of behavioral health, as well as medical services, peer support organizations. And I think that one of Tori's first main tasks in the fall when she begins working with y'all will be to really get to know the landscape of what services are out there, what exists, what are the intake processes for each of those organizations, what are the specific criteria for qualifying for services for the various organizations in the community, so that she is then able to be that link between community members who might need those services and the services that are available. And then the coordinator will also provide regular and ongoing follow-up with individuals who often come into contact with law enforcement for non-criminal matters. So I know in Silva, when we started working with the Silva PD, the officers there had a list of like 8 or 10 folks that they were like, you know, we get calls about these people pretty much every day. Like, could you work with them? Could you be proactive? Could you see what are the actual root causes of these issues rather than us just responding to the same calls over and over again? And so you may already have a caseload of folks identified for Tori to start working with, or those folks may come in over the course of the year. But one of the things that we really love about this program is that there isn't a time limitation on how long folks can receive services through the community care coordinator. It's really ongoing and as much as is needed. Again, this slide may be a little challenging to read. I may have put too much text on these, so I apologize for that if you're not able to see this. But the chart that I've put up there on the slide is our program development timeline. So Chief Myhand and John were able to attend a symposium that we hosted out on campus in March around this program, and we shared a manual with them. So this comes directly from that manual, but it kind of talks through the multi-year process of developing this program that we've engaged in with the Silva Police Department. The goals in the first few months are really establishing the processes and procedures, the initial outreach to community agencies, making sure that those relationships are built and in place. After the first 6 months or so, we would expect data collection to begin. We would expect that the coordinator would begin working with clients at that point, making referrals, providing follow-up support, and doing some initial ride-alongs and co-response with officers. After the first year of the program, we did in Silva implement a co-responding model where the social worker who is employed there now is spending more and more of her time out in the community rather than it being an office-based position. We don't recommend starting with that on day one. I think there's some important processes around building trust and relationships, understanding the processes and procedures before that co-responding can be really effective. But we do believe it can be really helpful after that initial development period. And in Silva, our progression has moved after 2 years of working with student interns. They did actually end up hiring one of their MSW interns who's now in a full-time paid position out there and is supporting interns of her own from the program. So just increasing the capacity there. Between now and August, we plan to go through the steps that are listed here with Hendersonville Police Department and the town, or I'm sorry, the city. Establishing the affiliation agreements, creating written policies around chain of command, confidentiality, and social worker safety. My colleague Cindy Caravellis generally does the initial presentations to officers because she's worked in law enforcement for a long time. And I tend to do the initial training for social work students. Y'all are incredibly lucky in Hendersonville because Tori is not new to this program. She's been working as our graduate assistant this year, so she's already very familiar with the program and really has a head start as compared to some other students who have stepped into these roles. And she will begin working with y'all in August of 2024 as part of her MSW program. And this might be a good time, Tori. Would you be able to introduce yourself for a moment here?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Tori. I am in my final year of my master's at WCU for social work. And like Professor Allen said, I have been her graduate assistant as well as Dr. Caravellis for the last semester. So not only am I already excited to do the work because I have a real passion and respect for law enforcement and what they do and what they're tasked with, but I also have been ingrained in the program kind of behind the scenes, and I know that it works, and I know it's an amazing model. So yeah, I'm just really excited and hopeful about the work that I'll be able to do.
So I'm happy to address any questions that y'all might have, or share any more information that would be useful about community care. We are working, in addition to Silva Police Department at this point, we do have a community care coordinator working in Waynesville. We're also working with the town of Boone, Lincolnton, a little further east, as well as Murphy and Cherokee County in the far western part of the state. So I'll stop there and see what questions y'all might have for us.
Questions?
I have a question. Can you go back to the previous slide? I'm extremely excited about this program, so I wish it started like tomorrow. And so just looking at the timeline, right? So if you guys have kind of been establishing kind of a program already, how critical is this 1 month to 6 month of establishing a program here if you have a program established? So like, I guess I'm just thinking like, we need somebody soon to help us, like,
yeah.
Does it really need to be, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just a little daunted by the timeline.
Well, I will say that
I'm sorry.
Tori will be working with us part-time, right? She's still a graduate student. She's a mother, a wife. She's got a lot. So it's approximately 20 hours a week. I think we're going to have to probably send her home. She'll probably work more than that. I think she's very excited to come work on that. And so I think the first semester for her will be us establishing our policies, introducing her to the connections that we already have here in Hendersonville, in Henderson County. And so she can establish that. They get to know who she is. And then that next semester, we start actually getting her to work. Again, she'll be part-time with us until at least she graduates, and then whatever the city decides to do at that point. But I've never done this before, so I'm really looking to Silva PD, to Western Carolina, to really inform how we do this. I mean, I'm open to any suggestions because I don't have an opinion on what works well or what doesn't. But this is what they found has worked so far. Maybe Tori's really up to speed and we can speed up this process. I'm sure those aren't hard numbers, but I would expect that, by summer of next year, we're having a conversation about what we want to do, continuing this program and making it maybe full-time at some point.
So good points, Chief. Angie and I are going to jump in here a minute, I think. Farther down our list in this holistic approach to public safety, and Katie and Tori don't know this, but we also are working with Pisgah Legal. I think that's where Angie was going with this. She's nodding her head. So we're working with have a contract with Pisgah Legal, which is a nonprofit, and they have. Go ahead, Angie. Do you want to talk about?
Sure. So as part of our ARP funding, the City Council set aside $330,000 to use to work with Pisgah Legal. And so John and I met with Jim Barrett last week, right, to talk about moving forward. And I think it's going to be able to move forward on a much quicker time frame. And I also think it's going to marry up well with, I hadn't heard this, but I think it's going to be a perfect fit because the funding is for a lawyer and a social worker for 2 years. And so they have a lawyer ready to go who will help us. 'Cause it's funny because we talked about a lot of the same things with them, that we need to establish a network of providers. And so one of the things that they said they can provide us direct legal support for is to develop what I think is going to be the affiliation agreements with, and so they already have a social worker, they already work with a lot of these nonprofit providers, and I really see law enforcement and Pisgah Legal as being two different points of entry into these, the program for people in need of these services. They have, I think, at least 2 social workers on staff already. That's an integral part of their services, but they do more. The social workers do more than just provide legal services. They provide direct social work support services. And so, anyway, so the lawyer will help us do those agreements. And in my mind, I picture it as establishing like a virtual connection center, because to place maybe the city at that central hub point of managing those connection and services. And so, like I said, the lawyer is ready to go. They have office space for the lawyer. It will be one main lawyer, but it's really a full-time position, so it could be dependent on the needs of the individual. But the goals for Pisgah Legal would be to help get support services that people in crisis need to either prevent homelessness or to get them back in housing. And so make them aware of resources that are out there that we're even not aware of to assist them. And then the social worker has established a lot of community connections already, their social work program. And so I think it can marry up really nice as a way to support each other. I think there'll be plenty of work.
Yeah, we
to go
anticipate.
around.
I mean, I think just looking at the daily police reports, I think it is going to marry up nice where Tori will be the contact in the police department, building those relationships with our law enforcement officers, with some of our folks on the street day in and day out. And then the Pisgah Legal piece is just going to be a tool that she can, I see her handing people off to the legal side with Pisgah Legal, helping getting identification, Social Security, disability, things like that people need help with, and vice versa. They'll just feed off each other. And then I think everybody will build a relationship with all the nonprofit services that are in the community, but it's really doubled down on providing that service level to try to help these folks that are in crisis and on the street and try to get them off the idea is to get them off the street, right? And that's, and into treatment, into housing, into those things. So I think it's, again, Tori will spend a good bit of her time getting things set up and started, but then I think we'll be off and running. And I know Dr. Allen is under promising and wanting to over deliver, and I think that makes absolute good sense. So I don't want to speak for you, Katie, but that's what I'd be doing if I were you. So
I think that's my general strategy. Yeah. And I do think it is true that it may be very possible to move more quickly than this. This timeline is, as we were developing the program in Silva, we didn't have a specific timeline in mind. It was really just an organic process of how the program developed over the first few years of working together. And we were starting from scratch with a lot of the policies and procedures. At this point, we have all of those documents that, Tori will be able to bring with her. Now, those may need to be adapted. The policies may not work exactly the same. We certainly don't want to, take something that was created in Silva and try to just drop it down in Hendersonville and assume it's going to work exactly the same. But at least there's a starting place, right? You're not going to be writing policies from scratch. You're going to be starting with something that's a draft and thinking about, well, how does this fit into our existing procedures and what do we need to adjust and change here? So I think that initial program development piece could move much more quickly. I do think that so much of this work is so relational, though, that there is also an element of not wanting to jump in too quickly before that trust is built. We found in some jurisdictions, officers are skeptical of working with a social worker. It may take them time to get used to having this person around, understand that this person is a resource and a support for them, and be able to, be willing to engage in that process of referrals and things like that. And that just takes some time because it's new and different, and it takes time for folks to build trust.
So that'll be on your May agenda.
Exciting.
And I think that, it's super exciting to hear about this project with Pisgah Legal. I wasn't aware of that, but have worked really closely with their social work team. Several of their social workers at Pisgah Legal are my former students and are just really fantastic people. And so that'll be really interesting to see how that develops as well.
Yep.
I think in communications that I've had with like local law enforcement too, I think that they're fatigued with this issue. And I think they are at the point too where they will gladly welcome social work. That's the communication that I hear. I have another question. So I don't know if it's the case in Silva. Jackson County is Silva. Do you guys have a diversion program with Jackson County court system? Because Henderson County has started a court diversion program, and how will this all connect to a diversion program, and does Pisgah Legal work throughout that program? And then I guess my other question is how are things dealt with when there's like blatant violent crime? And then is that where things get diverted directly to a diversion program, which then circles back to Pisgah Legal, or how does that work?
Well, I'll just speak briefly on the legal side. So serious crimes are almost never allowed a diversion program. So, those are probably not ones that we would refer to Tori. We might refer the victims to her so she can make sure they get connected to different resources. But I would think that, and I'm speculating, again, I don't know anything about how to do this. I'm learning on the fly. But I would think that our social worker, along with Pisgah Legal, if there was someone who needed to go through a drug treatment court, they would probably be that conduit to help make that connection and follow up on somebody. Again, I think Tori can probably speak to that better than anybody. But so
I think those people would be assigned a public defender who would then be helping to work through that process. Pisgah Legal is going to be more on the side of helping them get resources that they need to get off the street. Mm-hmm. And so be that getting signed up for Medicaid so they can go get glasses or what those kinds of things. Just helping them to get support services, or maybe helping them get into housing or stay in housing and avoid being evicted, that kind of thing.
I guess my question is, they're being encountered in a legal type setting, right? They're being encountered through some sort of offense, whether it be a criminal or
maybe.
Maybe. Well, first off, our money at Pisgah Legal is not providing criminal defense. We are not providing criminal defense. This Pisgah Legal will be there to provide the civil process kind of stuff as it relates to, again, getting Social Security cards if they've lost it, disability, Medicaid, those things that deal with maybe eviction issues to help them get housed. If it's a true crime, law enforcement's going to deal with it.
Okay.
And put them into the judicial system.
Okay.
And then once they're in the judicial system, we also are, as part of this, are building strong relationship with Jody Grabowski and their court diversion program. But they will get that on the judicial side, not on our side. And then I think what we hope to have happen is the true violent crime and the crime will be dealt for with law enforcement and judicial. But if you have somebody on Main Street that's just acting strange and needs some general, either it's substance abuse or mental health issues, and they're not committing a true crime, or
More of a disturbance as opposed to some
disturbance,
sort
and they
of
don't need,
violent
law
crime.
enforcement will triage, and then the social worker will come in and say, and try to build a relationship to get those folks back to their families, in treatment if that's what's needed, help them get to treatment, help get them to where they need. So that's, the idea is we're not moving away from the judicial system. We're trying, in some ways, we're trying to deal with folks that are not, that are just kind of nuisance or.
Well, in some ways, we kind of are trying to move away from that, but that's the goal, is that you're also not sending, people necessarily who need to be in the judicial system, who are literally going to just keep looping the
That's right,
system.
that's right.
I mean, that's the goal here, is
that's
to actually try to circumvent that. I
That's
mean,
right. It's keep-
So we, I have, over the last few years, formed the opinion that we cannot police today the way we did 5 years ago. We have to be innovative, think of different ways to, address the growing complexities of issues in all of our towns. And Councilwoman Hensley, you're 100% right. I could have used Tory yesterday. But my interest, John's interest, is making sure that we build this program right and so that it lasts for a long time. And that's what we're hoping to be able to do. And, we have an individual right now that is frequents Main Street, that causes a disturbance, acts very strange. And we have a list of people who will refuse to do anything to help someone who has severe mental illness. He acts very odd and alarming and puts people off, but he's not committing a crime. And we're hoping that cases like that, the cases like the Jackie Reed case from back in October, those types of people are individuals that hopefully Tory and this police social worker program will be able to help. Because some people, we are a square peg, right? And sometimes we don't fit in the round hole, and our only option is to take someone to jail. That's really not the best place for them. But we're out of tools, and so I'm excited. Tori, John and I met her. She's outstanding. I think she's going to be tremendous for this program, and really, hopefully, give us the ability to address some of these individuals that are we're just not well equipped to be able to deal with. And that's what I'm really hoping for with this program.
well, I appreciate so much that you're doing this, and that we have, someone in leadership in our community who's willing to do this and try this, and because clearly what is happening isn't working. And so thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Katie and Tori, I think, unless y'all have any last comments, we just appreciate y'all's time, and we can't wait to get Tori on the ground and get working.
And Katie, let me go ahead and give you one last time to correct anything that I got wrong or the chief got wrong, so.
No, it all sounded right to me. Yeah, we're really excited to be working with y'all. It sounds like, this is already my impression, but it's being confirmed tonight that Hendersonville and Henderson County just has so many more resources than Jackson County to begin with. So I think it's going to be a really interesting learning process for us, and as we're expanding the program across the region, just finding all of the ways that is similar but different in different towns, even just an hour down the mountain. I do hope that I get to meet y'all in person at some point, folks on the council. Thanks for having us here tonight, and look forward to working with you over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
All right. And I'll transition, but I will say again, I think Councilwoman Hensley, your assessment of how officers approach to this is spot on. She will find no resistance from Hendersonville PD to come and go to work. They're excited about it as well. So I'll move on to homeless persons. So I think I told y'all this was in March, around March or May, I can't remember exactly which one, in 2022. We created a code in our CAD system so we could actually track our encounters, interactions with homeless individuals in the city. So I could give you a better idea of what that looks like for us. You can see there are the numbers that since 2022. That is all of 2022, not just since when we started it in March. I will tell you that the numbers that you see for 2024 were as of Monday. I did check about lunchtime today, and we were up to 334 calls since, so another 25 calls since Monday of individuals. And so I think we're on pace to have 1,000, 1,200 or so interactions with homeless folks. Again, the most common call types that we have are, in that order, suspicious persons, larcenies, drugs, which includes overdoses, wanted individuals, and then we do have the infrequent assault that's reported to us involving homeless individuals. The most common locations are Greenville and Spartanburg highways, Chimney Rock Road, out past Walmart, and then, of course, our downtown area. This is a topic that comes up a lot. It's a very polarizing issue. People are on sort of one end of the spectrum or the other. I don't have the answers to solve this. I wish I did. I'd get the Nobel Peace Prize, I'm sure, but it's becoming something that we are dealing with every single shift, multiple times. Sometimes, there'll be 5 or 6 encounters. Sometimes there's 1 or 2, but it's rare that a shift goes by that we are not called to deal with a homeless individual. And something, again, most of the time it's just suspicious, which could be anything, but it's just, hey, someone. And again, the folks that we're dealing with are what I think the industry will call the chronic homeless. The ones that are sleeping in the woods, sleeping under bridges, not folks that are just lost their job and just got evicted. I mean, these are the folks that are just within our communities, and so they're coming from everywhere. Even today, driving around, I saw individuals walking who appeared to be homeless that I'd never seen before in the town. So, it's a growing problem for us, I think. Obviously, and I go off our calls for service, there is a growing cost of cleanup from some of these campsites. And I just pulled this picture off the internet. This is not in Hendersonville, but just reflective of some of the things that we find that, these campsites that we run into in the city, sometimes just outside the city, there are no facilities, there's no porta potties, there's no running water. So there's a lot of feces and a lot of trash and rotting food. And so it can become a public health hazard for folks. And so, the city at one point, or I think we have some data with respect to the cost of cleanup from other sites. I know there was a Duke site that cost Duke, of course, we're not paying to clean up a private site, but it costs Duke in the tens of thousands of dollars to clean up that site. And it becomes a maintenance issue. We have to continue to, to make sure those sites stay clean for the property owners. So, but that's kind of what we're seeing right now. The issues are becoming sometimes more complex. It's very hard to find the ability to get people connected to resources. Some people just choose not to, but the ones that, we can affect 10%, then I think we're winning. But we're stretched thin, and again, don't always have the resources. And we do have a lot of community partners, Salvation Army being one of the main ones that helps with that. But anyway, questions or comments about our interactions with homeless persons?
How many people that you encounter don't have IDs? Or how big a problem is that?
I'm not sure, Jeb. I think surprisingly, most people do have identification, or they're well known to the police department. And so I don't find, in fact, we talked to a gentleman yesterday, who, he had ID. So I think people are pretty frequently, we're finding them with IDs. So I don't know that.
I was just wondering how difficult it would be if they, if a lot of them didn't, to really try to get them into a system to where they could get, Medicare, something on that line, Medicaid.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully our social worker program will help us do that.
Yeah.
because a lot of it is like sometimes with veterans, I know that's a passion for you. They have their discharge, they need to get their rating changed so they can get connected to services. And so, we try to help with that as well.
When you get a veteran that is having issues, how do y'all handle it now? Who do you send them to?
We try to connect them to the VA, of course, that's right up the road, but a lot of veterans don't trust the VA, don't want to go to the VA. And so what I have practiced in the last, 10 or so, 15 years is really try to connect those individuals to local resources. I've rarely found a nonprofit or an organization unwilling to help a veteran out at little to no cost.
Right.
And so I think veterans, particularly ones that have a strained relationship with the VA, are willing to go to a local service if we can provide that. Where before, I did a lot of work with veteran crisis stuff. I don't have as high a capacity anymore to do it like I used to, but we have a few veterans on the department that of course, have a soft spot for that, and so we continue to work through. Just again, it's the same we would do for anybody else. The veteran just has a few more resources.
I know if you ever worked with VRQ, I know it's just past the VA over there, and they're an incredible facility. 250 homeless veterans, men, just in that one facility.
Yeah, I have not worked with them, but
I'll connect with you on that too, because I think sometimes even have people pick them up, and you can stay there for 2 years as long as you're working with them. They'll address any kind of substance abuse, just PTS. All of the things are there, and they'll also teach them. They have a culinary school on campus. They have a truck driving school on campus. Seriously good things that work. 250 churches came together and agreed to do this, if you can believe that. And it's an incredible facility, and they have a very high success rate if people are willing to just work at it.
yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I'll take that. I might need that for myself one of these days. I'm not sure. All right. Barring any questions on that, I'll move to the last slide, which is our mental health response, and I'll talk about CIT. Again, I've said this a couple times tonight, the individuals and the cases that we're dealing with are becoming more and more complex. The one individual that I've referenced downtown, we have reached out to, he's actually on probation, and his probation officer has, probably contacted half a dozen or more agencies to get him some treatment, and we've just run into roadblock after roadblock. We're seeing more people that are either untreated completely, or they're seeing a medical professional but have decided not to take their medication anymore. So once they're medicated, they function well, and then when they come off medication, they start having some crises. And so those are the folks that we're starting to see more and more of those. We've talked about how we're exceeding our capabilities. The mental health community, and I don't mean to offend anybody who works in that, but I think they would probably agree that it's a broken system, and there are not enough resources for the folks that need it. I do think, this is my personal opinion, that we are on the uptick of a pretty significant mental health crisis in the country. I think a lot of it is trauma, if that's the right word, from COVID and being at home, and children, and not being in school and stuff. So that continues to be an issue for us. Even more reason why we need to explore other options with respect to our response. The last thing, I know Councilwoman Hensley, we've talked about this before, about crisis intervention training. I told y'all that it is a priority for me and our agency that we get folks trained. So I have some data for you. So right now, we only have 13 of our 47 sworn staff that are CIT trained, I being one of them. We have gotten all of our civilian staff trained in mental health first aid. So that's a 1-hour class for folks that, it's an introductory level class on how to interact with folks, because, people come to the police department, they're angry about a parking ticket or whatever it is. So we have all of our staff that are trained in that. We have 10 officers enrolled in CIT this year. Unfortunately, the class that we had in April was canceled due to low enrollment. There were about 7 officers assigned to that. We had 5 of those 7. So they canceled that class, but I did talk to the VIA CIT coordinator for our area. We have worked on some other opportunities. In fact, the October class, I asked her to schedule as a replacement for this April class. Hopefully the officers that were signed up for that will be able to go. But the June and July classes are primarily for SROs, but our school resource officers, but I think she's going to allow us to try to slide some folks in there. 5 at a time is really the most that I can put in. I'd put in everybody in one class if I could, but obviously this CIT is a 40-hour week-long class, so we're trying to push as much as we can. But I was very disappointed that class was canceled. I know that this is a thing that's very important to you, Ms. Hensley. So any help that you can provide us to help spearhead this and get more training, I'm happy to accept. But that's kind of where we're standing right now. So we're again. CIT is it's not just Hendersonville PD. It's just not I don't see it as a high priority in Western North Carolina as it was what I experienced in the Raleigh-Wake County area. There were, I think, higher percentages of officers that were CIT trained. I think it's reflective of 7 officers signed up for one class. So that means only 2 officers from other agencies were even put into that. And I know everybody's short. We are as well, but this is a priority that we're going to continue to push forward because we need to give our officers the better skills to be able to to interact with folks with mental illness. So we did get invited to be part of the statewide steering committee, which I immediately accepted to be included in that as well. I didn't even know that existed until she and I talked. So I think that's all that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions about crisis intervention training for officers before I turn it over to Jay.
Is it the state that picks the providers?
Yep.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be better if there were more providers so that we could have more flexibility in the training? That would probably help get people to sign
I
up.
think there might be 7 providers across the state. They all have multiple counties. VIA happens to be ours.
Man, if I could tell you stories about that situation.
Well, I would love to talk about that
Whole
because
nother talk.
I don't understand, because we actually have qualified individuals in our own community that could teach our officers this training.
Well, the problem is VIA gets a MOU basically, and then they get.
Yeah. That is.
It's a bitter, I mean.
Story for another time.
Yep, it's a rabbit
Okay.
hole. Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Good job. And just continuing down, and a couple things that we won't cover tonight, we'll come back to in the essence of time, but this is, really taking, by the direction of the council, a holistic approach to improving safety in Hendersonville in general. And our core areas is very important to us, but also by some of and I'm going to turn this over to Jay in a minute to talk about some downtown security cameras. But the idea is that if we free up give law enforcement more tools, that allows them to be out all over the city, patrolling the entire city. And so that's really the goal of this holistic approach. It really is a holistic approach to deal with what we're seeing in our society right now. So let me turn it over to Jay Heathery, our team manager, to talk about a project that's in the budget, but want to really introduce it to you. And I'm not asking you to approve anything, but just kind of give you feedback. So thanks, Jay.
All right. Good evening, council. Again, I'm Jay Heatherly, your IT manager. Just wanted to introduce yet another tool to help assist with our PD for our downtown public safety. We're looking at implementing, a surveillance system or cameras here and there downtown. This will be a phased project over a couple of years, but starting in fiscal year 25. Right now, we're focusing on the intersections along Main Street. I've talked with Chief and his officers, and they've kind of highlighted areas that they thought were most of them appropriate to start with. I thought starting at South Main and working up, but they actually told me that they actually wanted to focus on areas between 7th and 3rd. So our goal is to get all of Main Street covered first, and then later on expand out to side streets or alleys. I provided you a map that you have, which is the same one that's up there. You may want to highlight areas that you think are important or that need more focus. We can focus on those areas and add those in as we go along. There was also, we wanted to focus on areas such as South Main and King Street, areas that are have a tendency for high flooding. During the last flood event that we had, PD expressed interest in being able to monitor heavy flooding areas, and that's just to check on levels and also barricades, making sure that nobody's intentionally going around barricades and getting stuck or, getting stuck in a dangerous situation. Also highlighted on the map is our two intersections there on 7th Avenue. Since 7th is undergoing construction right now, during the all that construction, we've already added conduit and stuff for in preparation, for these extra cameras or our Wi-Fi. So our goal for all this is to help our community and our visitors feel safe when they come and visit downtown. Thanks.
So we're sticking our toe in the water as it relates to using real-time crime data. I mean, this is these cameras will be used no, they won't be monitored 24/7, but they'll be available to us to review for crimes and just keep an eye on things in general. But at least initially, I don't want to give any expectation that somebody's going to be sitting there watching them, but they'll be available. I think that's correct. I don't think we're not, but they will be available for us to capture things and serve as a deterrent and help with law enforcement in the long run, and provide, again, they'll be somewhat visible. We'll want them to blend in somewhat just for aesthetics, but we don't want to hide them too much that people don't know that they're being watched. So in our downtown area. So I know there's different perspectives about that, but we wanted to introduce it, and we think by in this first year getting the backbone, so to speak, the infrastructure in place where we can expand the camera network as time goes by. So that's really Jay's charge, I think, the first year. It's just getting the backbone and getting it started. So,
How many the first year?
Unsure, because we're unsure of how much the infrastructure is going to take place. Working with ERC in order to get our network onto the Main Street. Not sure about the cost for that, but I feel confident that we can get at least the majority of our backbone done. So those few intersections, I'm pretty sure we could.
And these are fixed. There's no way to control them or rotate them. They're fixed.
So we have different options. With options come costs. The ones that I'm looking at potentially using for those intersections are actually a 4-way camera. There's 4 individual cameras inside one housing. Again, it's a balancing act between several different cameras or just one camera. Another one that's potentially looked at is the same 4-way camera, but also has one that has a PTZ or a pan tilt zoom that you can focus on more other areas for other events and stuff. If you have a downtown event going on, you can pan those over, look at those areas while maintaining coverage of your main streets.
I guess it's pretty well lighted down there all the time where these are. So
it is well lit. I can, if you want later on, I can show you videos or images from cameras that we're actually looking at, and you'd be very surprised about how they look.
And it's probably better to not even talk a whole lot about the monitoring and not monitoring, but hopefully they can be located somewhere. The TVs, the monitors can be located somewhere where they can be glanced up at pretty routinely, especially if something suspicious is going on, rather than using them, maybe use them to keep a fire from starting rather than put one out.
Yes, sir. So I would say that, I think our intent is to have monitors in our communication center where we do have people 24/7, but I want to allay any concerns that you might have or anybody in the public that this isn't us just surveilling the community, right? We will use this stuff I liken back to the Boston bombing, right? When that happened, that blast was captured on video. They were able to use the surveillance that they had to track and identify those individuals. And so I think we will mostly have this, it's there, we can look at it and see it, but someone's not going to be glued to the monitor. During special events, I think we will do that because, again, a much larger crowd down there. We want to make sure that we're, we're aware of different stuff. But part of this that I've really asked Jay to explore is the ability to do, for AI to be able, if I need to find, a guy in a red jacket with blue jeans on, you can put that in and that'll save us man hours to be able to, find and identify folks and stuff. So it's again, another tool, but this isn't Big Brother. This isn't us monitoring everybody 24/7. It's mostly will probably be an after an incident review of stuff. I'll remind you the fire that we had on First Avenue in January of 22, we had a very grainy Ring camera footage of that event. And so we captured that, we knew it was actual arson, but we couldn't find any, cameras that we were able to find out where these folks came from, where they went, track them down. And so I think this will eventually help us to be able to, that, because the owner of that property, it's just now being renovated because of the insurance issues about us, whether it was fraud or not. So I think it'll help our community in the long run.
I totally support this and like it. And it's not like you're going to be given speeding tickets with it and anything like that. This is for security. We have a commitment to public safety. That's a part of this. And I didn't want it to be in a room somewhere with the door closed. I wanted it hopefully to be in the communications area. If they get a call and there's something going, that they can glance up and give your officers that are being dispatched to it some heads up as to what they're going to face.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm
with Jeff.
I love it.
And if it's possible to get them near bridges and overpasses, because I know that is a area where, especially over water, where people like to pull up and they like to dump all their trash. And I know Lindsay and I have participated in several stream cleanups where we were pulling.
You wouldn't believe the stuff that we pulled out of there.
Out of the waterways. And it's literally people will pull up to an overpass, like over a bridge, dump a whole bedroom suit of furniture, maybe some TVs, whatever. So if we have all that, that'd be great. Blessed.
It is 1 minute to 6. So I know we're up against our 2-hour window here. We got one item I think we could probably cover as it relates to public input. I'm looking to city attorney whether we should defer the closed session to.
That's fine.
We could defer it to the.
Sure.
To the next meeting, which is next week. I don't think I have anything in closed session next week.
I'd kind of like to talk about.
Never mind. Okay. Well, maybe, Allison, we'll divert public input conversation for 1 week and put that on next week, and we'll just go to closed session then.
Yeah, I don't have anywhere to be, so.
Okay. So let's do that. Let's divert. Allison's good. So.
You didn't set an appointment for 6:07?
No, not today.
Wednesday, on a council meeting Wednesday?
Are we ready?
Just read
Okay.
it.
Awesome. I move that city council enter closed session pursuant to NC General Statute 143-318.11 A1, 3, and 6 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the general statutes, to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness of an individual public officer or employee.
Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of entering closed session for the reasons